Hello and welcome to this workshop. Today we are going to be talking about strategies to combat a sedentary lifestyle. This is all about standing up for your health. I am Coach Heather. I am a published weight loss, nutrition, and behavior scientist. I'm also a board-certified nutrition specialist and a mind-body medicine practitioner. I specialize in functional nutrition and integrative wellness to help people achieve optimal health. My focus is on whole body wellness. And today we are going to talk about quite a few things. The first is going to be to create an awareness, an overall awareness around your total sitting time. We'll then get into the long-term impact of a sedentary lifestyle. And then we'll talk about that saying that you may have heard, is sitting really the new smoking? Where did that come from? And then finally, we'll talk about strategies to help you combat a sedentary lifestyle, specifically focused on sitting. So let's take a minute and calculate the total sitting time that we are kind of engaged in on a regular basis. We'll specifically focus on a work day. So start by just running a quick tally of your working and commuting hours. So how much time are you spending working and commuting? And how much time are you sitting during that space? Then think through eating and socializing. We spend, 3 meals a day, probably sitting at a table plus snacks. A lot of times we're sitting to socialize with our family and friends. So how much time would you say that you are engaged in that kind of activity? The last thing to account for is while we're at home, right? Things like watching TV or scrolling on your phone, or even sitting on the phone talking. That relaxation and downtime that we have can be a significant amount of time spent sitting as well. So think through that. And then realize that we chronically underestimate this. So whatever you come up with, you may want to tack on an extra hour or so. And now let's look at the research. So I took a minute to just try to figure out through the research, what is the average number? And I found a survey that came up with this number of 6 to 8 hours. And this comes from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, which is, definitely very credible, but it's self-reported. And so again, just like I mentioned on the last slide, we chronically underestimate. So that estimation of 6.4 to 8.2 hours of sitting each day, I feel like probably not quite enough. So I looked at another study and found an international journal of environmental research and public health. And they looked specifically at office workers. And that had a number that I think is a little bit more believable. That was closer to 10 hours of sitting, with more than 70% of the work being sedentary. So 70% of the work activity was spent basically in a seated position at a desk. And basically what that means is 1 in 4 Americans, or 25% of us, are sitting more than 8 hours a day. So if we were to take a look at these numbers here, where do you fit? For me personally, I am closer to that 8 to 10 hours. And if we look here at this little gradient here, just to kind of indicate the overall risk, 8 to 10, more than 10, these are going to be really in the red. And what does in the red mean? Well, that means that we're going to start having the negative impacts of this sedentary lifestyle. And so what are these long-term impacts? There's quite a few. And if we think about sedentary lifestyle, what does sedentary even mean? So I looked at a little bit into the research and I found, the Latin root of this is sedere, and sedere means to sit. And sitting, essentially, it impacts a couple of things. One is our metabolism. So when we are impacting our metabolism, obviously this is going to have problems with metabolic rate. So it's going to slow our metabolism down. This is going to lead to weight gain, obesity, direct link within the research showing that the more sitting time the more time that we're engaged in sitting or sedentary behavior, the higher the risk of obesity and weight gain. Again, that has a lot to do with the metabolic processes. We know that when we sit for prolonged periods of time, it's going to decrease, again, our metabolic rate, but that's also going to cause a reduction in insulin sensitivity. It's going to impair glucose metabolism. And this starts to disrupt the body's ability to regulate blood sugar levels effectively. And so that's going to then lead to things like diabetes. Another thing that it starts to increase the risk for is heart disease. And this is really interesting. Several studies have linked prolonged sitting or periods of prolonged not moving, sedentary kind of behavior with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. This is things like heart disease and strokes. And we know that this is going to contribute to elevated blood pressure, unhealthy cholesterol levels. That means so high levels of LDL, lower levels of HDL, where we start to dysregulate, a healthy lipid panel, and impaired blood flow. So when we sit, we're going to have a higher risk of blood clots and things like that. So movement is going to be really important to be able to keep all of those things moving. The last one that I was really kind of curious to see, and again, saw that this was just within the published research, and there wasn't a little bit of published research. There's a lot of published research that links cancer to prolonged periods of sitting. So, and a lot of this is things like colon cancer, endometrial cancer, lung cancer. And a lot of this has to do with, again, the metabolic changes that promote inflammation. So inflammation, this chronic state of inflammation, can cause this imbalance in cell cycle regulation, hormonal imbalances, which can then contribute to cancer development. And so it's important to note that all of these health risks, they're not solely related to sitting or overall sedentary behavior, but it's part of an overall lifestyle. And so let's think through this. Is sitting really the new smoking? I would imagine that many of you listening have heard this before. If you've opened up social media at all, it's kind of all over there. But is it really fair to compare sitting to smoking? Ideally, the whole purpose is to draw attention to the potential negative health impacts of prolonged sitting. I've just gone over a lot of those. But one thing really to note here is, we know that smoking is bad for us. There's a giant warning label right on the package. Sitting, on the other hand, well, it doesn't come with a warning label. So who put the warning label on the chair, right? Well, did a little bit of research, and I found that this idea, this phrase, sitting is new smoking, it came from Dr. James Levine, who is a behavior scientist, specifically studying sedentary behavior. And he used this really to highlight the harmful effects of prolonged sitting according to his research. His aim was to raise awareness about the importance and try to help reduce the risk of it. So just as we know, right, smoking's not good for us, we're very well informed, we're very well warned, we see all of the research coming out, we want to make that informed decision. So the idea is to help inform us about those types of behaviors. Because again, like you just saw on the last slide, being sedentary, it impacts things like our metabolism, cardiovascular health, and physiological processes. Those are things that make us sore and stiff. We'll get into pain and things like that in just a minute, but really recognizing the importance of this lifestyle, right? This overall lifestyle. It's easier for us to make conscientious decisions when we see giant warning labels on things. So the moral of the story here is that it is time to take a stand. We want to start prioritizing movement into our workplace. This isn't a nice to do. This isn't something that we'd like to have. This is a must do. So, and let's look at the research for some guidelines to help us get a target, right? What do we want to work toward? We know that we need to stand. We know that obviously we can't not sit, right? That's going to be part of our day. But how much should we focus on to really make an improvement or reduce these risks that we just talked about? Well, I found this study and I thought it was really, really helpful. This comes from an international group of experts who conferred to provide guidance for employers and employees to promote the avoidance of these prolonged periods of sitting at work. And all of the recommendations come basically from looking at all of the available research to date, including long-term epidemiological studies and intervention studies. And intervention studies basically getting people to do something, right? Some sort of standing activity, and then looking at the comparative results compared to a control. And they then ranked the evidence in quality using 4 levels of the American College of Sports Medicine. And this is what they came up with. So for people who work predominantly at like a desk job, a desk-based job, workers should aim to initially work towards 100 minutes of standing time a day. They then said 2 hours is really what that goal should be. And so what that means is working towards at least 2 hours of movement during that 8-hour workday. And we'll talk about how to try to think through this. To break things down though, starting with 100 minutes. So 100 minutes of movement started to show positive health benefits. The maximum benefits started to happen when people did at least 2 hours, though. So this is why I give you both of those numbers. Starting, right, making positive progress with that 100 minutes of movement a day in an 8-hour workday is going to provide benefits. But the goal should be at least 2 hours of movements during normal work days. And another really interesting thing is not only does movement help with the health, right, and pain and all of these other things for us, but it actually helps us be that much more productive. And so this is another study that took a look at a workplace movement program. So it was sit less, move more. And there's a lot of studies here. I just happened to grab this one because I thought it had, a great overview of what I wanted to talk about. But essentially, they looked at health-related outcomes of office employees. The goal was to combat sedentary behavior and promote more physical activity during the workday. So it was a randomized controlled trial, meaning they had a control group and an intervention group, and they used various departments within the organization. And people that were in the intervention, so people that were in that active experimental group, they had access to standing workstations. They were given reminders to take regular breaks. They were given more opportunities to take physical activities during work hours. The control group basically just followed standard practice. They didn't have anything implemented in the workday, so they just kind of kept it the same. And what was really interesting within the results, they found that the group that was moving had a huge positive impact on all kinds of work-related outcomes and efficiency-related outcomes for office employees. Basically, it increased productivity, it improved focus, it improved concentration, it increased overall job satisfaction compared to that control group. So the employees in the intervention group also reported reduced levels of fatigue. So they felt less fatigued. They had more energy throughout the workday. And so studies like this showcase, not only is it great for the employee, but it's great for just how much more productive you can be. I mean, if we can get a lot more done because we're less fatigued and we have more energy and we're concentrating and we can think better, we can think more clearly, it's that much more motivation to get up and move so that you can just get through your workday and feel productive. And all right, so pain is another big thing. Physical activity and stretching is a really big benefit to help alleviate pain. And in the United States, chronic pain is something that it's affecting a significant portion of the population. According to a study that was published in the Journal of Pain, it's estimated that 20.4% of adults in the United States experience chronic pain. That's 1 in 5. So 1 in 5 adults are experiencing chronic pain. And work-related pain, basically associated with prolonged sitting, it's a common issue. A study published in the Journal of Occupational and Environmental Medicine found that approximately 22% of work-related injuries in the United States are directly related to musculoskeletal disorders, including pain and discomfort that's resulting from prolonged periods of sitting. Chronic pain is also a global concern. A systematic review in the European Journal of Pain reported the global prevalence of chronic pain ranged from 4 to 50%, with the average right around the same as where we are at the United States, about 20.2%. And work-related pain from sitting, it's recognized as a significant contributor to these musculoskeletal issues in that workplace worldwide. So the question is, how do we tackle this preventatively? If you think about it, is pain something that bothers you? Do you notice that after you're sitting for prolonged periods of time, you notice that your back is sore, your shoulders are sore, maybe your legs start to get sore? If you, aren't mindful about getting up throughout the day, maybe later on at night when you're trying to sleep, you notice you have restless leg or, just problems falling asleep because things are not feeling great. So how do we tackle this? How do we think about preventing this from happening? Well, this is a study that I pulled, and it looked at exercising during work breaks. And this is shown to be really, really beneficial. And in this study, employees were given a series of little flexibility things, right? So they were doing 10 minutes a day, and their flexibility, they were working on their back, and their wrists to specifically help with carpal tunnel and like that stiffness that you get in your wrist from holding your hands in a particular position for a prolonged period of time. And so after 6 months, 10 minutes of stretching exercises, they found significant improvements in wrist flexion and wrist extension, low back flexibility, but then also emotional things like fatigue, anger, depression, and improved mood. Overall, the study authors recommended that these exercises, it's so easy to integrate into the workplace, and that it was such a huge and positive impact to be able to make these preventative measurements, take these preventative measures for cumulative pain and then improved mood states within the office. Another study that I grabbed, this one specifically looked at different types of stretching exercises during a prolonged period of sitting, specifically within the workplace. And their recommendations basically tell us when and how to take a break to be able to mitigate these risks of specifically muscle pain. And this was really interesting because the study was high tech. They had 6 different groups, and each group was hooked up to this electromyography machine. And basically, these are things that look at the nervous impulses, so they can see when when things are firing within your muscles. And they used this to measure the variations when people were taking different breaks. So when they were being sedentary and sitting stationary at their desk, and then when they started to move around. And they had different types of breaks. There were passive breaks, active breaks, breaks where they were just kind of changing their posture, breaks where they were standing, and breaks where they were stretching. And these were 5 to 10 minutes. So these weren't long periods of time, but they did use these breaks throughout the workday. And then they looked at these EMG machines to assess both subjectively, so asking people, how do you feel, right? And then objectively to look at the data. What does that actually say? And it was really cool. So the EMG experiment showed that muscle fatigue started to happen. So muscle pain, right? So that starts to happen after about 40 minutes of sedentary work. So sitting stationary at your desk, not moving for 40 minutes. After 40 minutes, the average participant started to have pain. And the intervention, though, people that were able to get up and move around, it showed that stretching for 5 minutes was the most effective break type. Basically, what happened was it put the muscles back into a recovery state and left it there for 30 to 45 more minutes. So the stretch, being able to stretch, kind of get up, move around, stretch a little bit, seemed to be the most effective way of being able to get those muscles back into that recovered state. So this is cool because it provides the why behind the movement for every 30 to 60 minutes. It's not just kind of something we're pulling, right? It's just coming from the research. We have this backed by science. All right, in the last study, this was a systematic review. And again, I love systematic reviews because they basically pull research, all of the available research to answer a question. And so this specifically was wanting to look at stretching exercises. What kind of impact do stretching exercises performed at work have on this musculoskeletal disorder, so pain, and then productivity? So stretching exercises at work, what kind of impact do they have on pain and productivity within the workplace? And the study, looking at all of the studies, found that incorporating periodic stretching breaks during this prolonged period of sitting time, not only did it help reduce pain and discomfort, but it also improved productivity. And again, looking across all different types of studies. One thing, though, to note, one thing that was really interesting is the importance of doing stretching exercises correctly and being able to listen to your body as needed. So working through the pain when you're not working with somebody that's trained to be able to help you, probably not a great idea. If it's adequately performed, right, or if it's inadequately performed, you could aggravate an injury. So you want to make sure that you're not doing that. One thing that you could do is take a look at the content that we have in the Woliba platform. You'll notice there's a little icon that says Get Moving. You'll find all kinds of quick streaming videos that offer 5-minute workouts from our fitness experts who are well qualified to be able to deliver that kind of information. That way you know that you're going to be getting the right kind of direction and guidance when you do some of these different movements. All right, and so what does that start to look like? What would your day look like? Well, the first thing that I would suggest is to take a break, right? Every 30 to 60 minutes. We just went over the why behind that. These 30 to 60-minute breaks are going to help combat those negative effects that we started to talk about. But how do we do that? How do we think about, every 30 to 60 minutes, we're going to take a quick stretch break? Well, you may want to schedule your breaks at the beginning of the day, especially your lunch break, your bigger breaks, your 10-minute breaks, your 15-minute breaks, whatever that is. However you have your breaks broken down into your workday, plan it out And what I found is that when I plan it at the beginning of the day, I'm that much more likely to follow it. If I have, the same exact lunch break every single day and it just kind of runs and it's that same repeated event, I'm less likely to honor that time as much. But when it's something that I've thought through and said, you know what, my lunch is going to work best at this time, I'm going to be a lot more mindful to then take it. And then during that break, what can you do? What kind of movement can you do? Stretching, walking, maybe you can get a quick exercise in. But finding those little pockets, right? In addition, is going to be where you can find those 5 minutes, those 3 minutes, those 2 minutes, whatever it is, to be able to stand, stretch, go get yourself a glass of water, go up and down the stairs, whatever that is. Take a look at your day, find those pockets, schedule everything in, and then start with that goal of 100 minutes. 100 minutes of standing time, moving time, 100 minutes during that day where you're not sitting at your desk. With that overall goal, of course, like we mentioned, of 2 to 4 hours of standing time in an 8-hour workday. I don't know about you, 4 hours feels a little bit undoable for me. Feels like that's going to take quite a bit to work up to. So if you're feeling like that sounds a little bit unrealistic, I'm right there with you. But that is what the suggestions were. I think a great goal to work towards, though, is that 2. So trying to get at least 2 hours in after you can get the 100 minutes in solid, no problem. Then bumping up to try to get to 2 hours, I think, is that next important step. And of course, moving, right? Moving, walking, all these different things, stretching, all of those are going to count. All of those little minutes add up. So how do we make movement a priority? Well, let's go back, to some of the things that we've reviewed in other workshops. SMART goals. SMART goals are going to be something that's so important. Saying, all right, I'm going to walk more during the workday. That's great. It's awesome. It's a goal. But, is it really setting you up for success? You want something specific, something measurable, something attainable, something relevant, and something time-bound. So I'm going to walk more. That's great. But I'm going to walk for at least 10 minutes every day after lunch, right? That's going to be something that's a lot more specific, relevant, time-bound. It's going to be a little bit more likely to bring you to success. The idea is to set a clear objective so that you can have a target to work towards, and then you can be able to track your progress and kind of go back and forth and see if maybe there's something that you need to work towards. Maybe you need to define it better. Maybe lunch isn't a good time. Maybe you need to put it somewhere else. Start with the SMART goal and schedule your breaks. I've said this, I think this is the 3rd time now. Schedule your breaks. Actively scheduling your breaks throughout the day is going to help you break up those prolonged periods of time. I'm a huge fan of my smartwatch. I think both Apple and Fitbit do a great job being able to remind you to get up when you've been sitting for prolonged periods of time, little buzz on the wrist. You see it saying time to stand. If you don't have that, you can also set little alarms for little reminders. Post-it notes do a great job. Even saying, all right, after I read an email, I'm going to get up and take a stretch, really simple ways, but you have to think through how that works in your day. Social support is going to be huge. Talk with your coworkers, talk with your family, get a support group going. Maybe you want to start a walking group within your team. This is going to make it that much easier to lean on other people to help push you along the way. Don't forget about rewards and incentives. We are definitely going to be more engaged when we are working towards some sort of incentive. For me, it's like, all right, if I want, a new bag or a new pair of shoes, I'm going to set some, target to be able to hit. If I can do this for a month straight, I'm going to get myself those new pair of shoes. So that's what works for me. I'm sure you have different ideas that will work for you as well. Of course, monitoring and tracking progress is going to be important as well. Again, I like to be able to use the fitness apps because you can kind of see and track how many steps you're doing, right? So if you decide this month, I'm going to walk more, take a look at what your baseline is, add to that. And then every month you can kind of keep trying to track more and add, and you'll be able to see your average go up over time. And of course, failing is part of it. Fail again, fail better. One of my favorite quotes, we learn from our failures, and that's an activity, right? That's a learning opportunity to see how you can do things better. You're learning about yourself. You're learning what works, what doesn't work. But when things do work, don't forget to celebrate your success. So much research shows that that's how we're able to actually rewire our brain. When we celebrate those successes, our brain says, oh, what I did is good. I want to make sure I do that again. So celebrating your success, it's going to provide that positive reinforcement, that positive feedback loop to tell our brain, this is what we want to do. All right, and some really quick, some benefits of walking. So we talked about stretching. Stretching and walking are some things that you can really, really easily incorporate into the day to add up to those 100 minutes. Quick walk around the office, quick walk around the parking lot, up and down the stairs. It does some really amazing things. And here's 5 that I've pulled. It actually comes from a review in Harvard. But epigenetic regulation. So epigenetics, these are our genes. So this study looked at 32 obesity promoting genes in 12,000 people. And they determined that these genes were actually able to be turned off. So this means that these people have these genes that are going to predispose them to being obese, but they're not. And it's because they walked briskly, basically for an hour a day. So people that were able to walk for over an hour a day didn't see the effects of having these obesity genes, whereas people that didn't walk did. So walking was a way to regulate the genes. So that's epigenetic regulation. It also can tame a sweet tooth. A study that was from the University of Exeter found that 15 minutes of walking helped participants curb cravings of chocolate and even reduce the amount of chocolate that they ate in stressful situations. It also helps reduce the risk of breast cancer. And research already knows that any kind of physical activity is going to blunt the risk of breast cancer. But the American Society for Cancer reported in a study that wanted to zero in on what kind of activity was the most beneficial. And they found that walking, specifically for women, even women that were predisposed to breast cancer risk factors, had a significantly reduced risk of actually having breast cancer later on in life. It can also help ease joint pain. There's several studies that talk about walking and how it can help reduce inflammation, arthritis, different types of things. It helps lubricate our joints and our muscles that support them. And last but not least, it boosts immunity. This one was really interesting. This was a study of over 10,000 men and women who walked at least 20 minutes a day, at least 5 days a week. So not a ton of time, 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. They had 43% fewer sick days than those who exercised once a week or less. And if they did get sick, it was for a shorter duration and the symptoms were milder. So kind of cool. So how are we going to get started? Well, again, the first thing to recap, schedule your breaks every morning. I think that's going to be one of the most positive impacts that you can make. Being able to take a look at your day. Where do these little pockets of time fit in my day? Make that a goal to move around every 30 to 60 minutes. Again, we went through that study that kind of explained why our muscles start to get pain. They fire off those pain triggers because we're not moving. After about 30 to 60 minutes, quick stretch is going to give you that protection of 30 to 45 minutes again. Aim for 100 minutes to start, 100 minutes of movement during that 8-hour work period with that overall goal of a minimum of 2 hours. And then walking and stretching, those are going to be 2 really helpful movements that you can help prevent pain. All right, so really quickly, these frequently asked questions. How can I stay motivated to move more consistently? Well, set clear goals. Make it easy. Use a prompt. We've gone through quite a bit of these planning strategies, but setting a clear goal and then making it really easy to do, and then reminding yourself with some sort of prompt is going to make it that much easier. We can't necessarily rely on motivation. Motivation is fickle. It's going to come in waves. And so we can't rely on that as our way to be able to get things done. The second one is, I'm so busy. How could I possibly find more time to move? Well, make a plan. Start by blocking your schedule and prioritizing movement. You can also work, try to get an identity around it, right? I'm the kind of person who walks at least, whatever it is, 6,000 steps a day. I'm the person that walks 10,000 steps a day. Try to identify this as this new healthy lifestyle that you're embracing and break it up. You don't have to do everything all at once. In fact, it's better to have little bits of movement throughout the day. That's going to provide more protective benefits than having one bout of exercise at the end of the day. And of course, you use our resources, utilize the resources that we have on the Woliba platform. You'll find stretching, physical activity, yoga, all kinds of things to be able to help move, but in the correct postures so that you're not going to be injuring yourself. All right, and that concludes our event. I hope you found it helpful and you feel ready to make more movement a priority in your workday. If you need or you want more support, let's chat. Again, my name is Heather. My email is on the slide.